The scar that ran from Beatrice Fuller's left temple to her jaw had been a gift from her father's drunken rage when she was 16. And in the 8 years since, she had learned to read the revulsion in people's eyes before they even turned away. She kept her chestnut hair long and arranged it carefully each morning to hide the worst of it. But no amount of careful styling could disguise the way the raised tissue pulled at the corner of her mouth, giving her a permanent expression that looked somewhere between a grimace and a smile. Alta, Utah in the summer of 1878 was a small mining town clinging to the Wasatch Mountains, and Beatrice had arrived 3 months ago with nothing but a battered carpetbag and the bone-deep certainty that she would die alone. The boarding house where she rented a cramped room on the 2nd floor smelled of boiled cabbage and unwashed miners, but Mrs. Henderson, who ran it, had asked no questions when Beatrice showed up with enough money for a month's rent. The old woman had looked at the scar, then looked away, and that had been that. Beatrice found work at the general store, stocking shelves and keeping accounts in the back room where customers would not have to see her face. Mr. Paulson, who owned the store, was kind enough in his distant way, paying her fairly and never mentioning the fact that she arrived early and left late, as though she had nowhere else to be and nothing else to fill her days. It was a Thursday afternoon in late June when Thomas Riker first walked into the store, his boots leaving dusty prints on the swept floor. Beatrice was on a ladder, reaching for a bolt of calico on the highest shelf when she heard the door chime. She glanced down and saw him, tall and rangy with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore the practical clothes of a working cattleman, denim trousers and a faded blue shirt, and there was something about the easy way he moved that suggested a man comfortable in his own skin. She turned her face away instinctively, letting her hair fall forward, and focused on wresting the heavy bolt of fabric from its place. Her arms trembled with the weight of it, and she was trying to figure out how to get down the ladder without dropping it when a voice spoke from directly below her. "That looks heavy. Hand it down to me." Beatrice froze. She had not heard him approach. "I can manage," she said, her words coming out more sharply than she intended. "I am sure you can," he said, and there was no mockery in his voice, just a statement of fact. "But you do not have to." Something in his tone made her look down at him. He stood at the base of the ladder, his hands raised and ready, his face tilted up toward her. His eyes were a startling shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the mountains, and they were looking at her face without flinching. Not with pity, not with disgust, just looking. She handed him the bolt of fabric, her hands shaking slightly, and climbed down the ladder. When she reached the floor, she turned away immediately, busying herself with smoothing her skirt. "What can I help you find?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I need supplies," he said. "Flour, salt, coffee, sugar. Beans if you have them. Some jerky and hard tack. I am heading out to the high country for a few weeks." Beatrice nodded and began gathering the items, acutely aware of him watching her. She could feel his eyes on her as she moved through the store, and it made her clumsy. She nearly dropped a sack of flour and had to catch it against her chest, leaving a white smudge on her dark blue dress. "You are new here," he said, as she wrapped the items in brown paper and twine. 3 months, she said shortly. "I am Thomas Riker. Most people call me Tom. I have a small ranch about 10 miles south of town. Beatrice Fuller." She did not offer a shortened version of her name. No one had called her anything but Beatrice in years, and she liked it that way. Nicknames suggested familiarity, friendship, things she had learned not to hope for. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Fuller." He paused, and she could sense him trying to find something else to say. Finally, he added, "That is a fine hand you have with the accounts. I saw the ledger when I came in." "Very neat." Beatrice looked up at him sharply, suspicious of mockery, but his expression was sincere. "Thank you," she said stiffly. He paid for his supplies, tipped his hat to her, and left. Beatrice watched him through the window as he loaded the parcels onto a sturdy bay horse, swung into the saddle with practiced ease, and rode out of town. She told herself she was glad to see him go, that she hoped he would stay in the high country for months, that she had no interest in seeing those storm cloud eyes again. She told herself a lot of things that were not true. Thomas Riker returned to Alta 2 weeks later, and when he came into the store, he was carrying a bunch of wildflowers. Beatrice was behind the counter, updating the inventory list, and she looked up when the door chimed. Her stomach did an odd little flip when she saw him, and she hated herself for it. "Miss Fuller," he said, walking up to the counter. He held out the flowers. "I thought you might like these. I found them up in the meadows above my place. The whole hillside was covered in them." Beatrice stared at the flowers as though they were a snake about to strike. They were beautiful, a mix of purple lupines and yellow balsam root, and she could not remember the last time anyone had given her flowers. Actually, she could remember. It had been never. No one had ever given her flowers. "Why?" The word came out harsh and suspicious. Thomas looked taken aback. "Because they are pretty, because I thought you might enjoy them." "I do not need your pity." His eyebrows drew together. "It is not pity, it is just flowers." "Nothing is just anything," Beatrice said, and she could hear the brittleness in her own voice. "People do not give flowers to women like me unless they pity them or they want something." Thomas set the flowers carefully on the counter. "People like you," he repeated slowly. "You mean women who work hard and keep good accounts and have pretty eyes." Beatrice felt heat flood her face. "Do not mock me." "I am not mocking you. Your eyes are pretty. They are brown with little gold flecks in them like creek stones in the sun. I noticed the other day." She did not know what to say to that. She stood there, her hands clenched at her sides, wanting to believe him and not daring to. Finally, she said, "Thank you for the flowers. Was there something you needed from the store?" If he was disappointed by her response, he did not show it. "Just some ammunition, and maybe some of that hard candy if you have it, the lemon ones." She got him what he needed, and when he left, the flowers were still sitting on the counter. Beatrice stared at them for a long time. Then, when she was sure no one was looking, she took them into the back room and put them in a jar of water. They lasted for 5 days, and she looked at them every morning when she arrived and every evening before she left. Thomas came into town every few days after that, always with some reason to visit the store. Sometimes he needed supplies. Sometimes he claimed he had been passing through and thought he would check if any letters had come for him at the post office next door. He always stopped to talk to Beatrice, and he always acted as though there was nothing unusual about his attention. At first, Beatrice was stiff and suspicious, waiting for the cruel joke to reveal itself. But Thomas was patient. He talked about his ranch, about the cattle he was raising, about the hard work of building something from nothing. He asked her questions about herself, and when she gave short, defensive answers, he did not push. He just kept showing up, kept talking, kept looking at her as though she was someone worth looking at. One morning in early July, Beatrice arrived at the store to find Thomas sitting on the bench outside, his hat tipped back on his head. He stood when he saw her. "You are here early," she said. "I wanted to ask you something before the day got away from me." He shifted his weight, and Beatrice realized with surprise that he was nervous. "There is a dance at the community hall on Saturday night. I wondered if you would go with me." Beatrice felt as though all the air had been sucked out of her lungs. "No," she said immediately. Thomas blinked. No, I do not go to dances." "Have you been to one since you came to Alta?" "No, and I do not intend to start." Why not? Beatrice gestured at her face, the anger rising in her chest. Why do you think? So people can stare at me. So I can watch you realize what a mistake you made asking the scarred woman to a dance. Thomas stepped closer, and his voice was quiet but firm. I know what you look like, Beatrice. I have known since the first day I walked into this store, and I still want to take you to the dance. Why? She demanded, and she hated the way her voice shook. Why do you keep coming here? Why do you keep talking to me? What do you want? I want to get to know you better, he said simply. I want to spend time with you. I want to take you to a dance and maybe hold your hand if you will let me. I do not understand you. What is there to understand? I like you. I think you are interesting and smart and prettier than you give yourself credit for. I like the way you concentrate when you are working on the accounts, and I like the way you organize the shelves so everything is just so. I like talking to you, even when you are prickly as a cactus. Beatrice shook her head. You are going to change your mind. Everyone always does. Then let me prove you wrong. He held her gaze, his gray-blue eyes steady. Come to the dance with me. If you hate it, I will bring you straight home. If I do something that makes you uncomfortable, tell me and I will stop, but give me a chance. Give yourself a chance. She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect herself, to keep the walls high and strong, but there was something in his face, some quality of honest hope that made her hesitate. I do not have a dress suitable for dancing, she said finally. Wear what you have. You will look fine. People will talk. People always talk. Let them. Beatrice took a deep breath. If I say yes and if I hate it, you will leave me alone after. Thomas considered this. If you truly want me to leave you alone, I will, but I do not think that is what you really want. He was right, and that terrified her. All right, she said quietly, I will go. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. Saturday night, I will pick you up at 7. He tipped his hat and walked away, and Beatrice stood on the wooden sidewalk, wondering what she had just agreed to and whether she was brave enough to go through with it. Saturday evening arrived far too quickly. Beatrice spent the afternoon in her room at the boarding house, changing her dress 3 times and trying different ways to arrange her hair. Nothing looked right. The scar was still there, always there, a constant reminder of everything she had survived and everything she had lost. At 6:45, she almost climbed out the window and ran. She had one leg over the sill when she heard Mrs. Henderson calling up the stairs. Miss Fuller, your gentleman is here. Beatrice pulled her leg back in, smoothed her dark green dress and took several deep breaths. She could do this. She could walk down the stairs, get into whatever wagon or buggy Thomas had brought and go to the dance. And if it was awful, if people stared and whispered and Thomas finally saw her the way everyone else did, at least she would know. At least she would stop hoping. Thomas was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, and when she descended, he watched her with an expression she could not quite read. When she reached the last step, he offered his arm. You look beautiful, he said. You do not have to say things like that. I know I do not have to. I want to. They walked outside, and Beatrice was surprised to see not a wagon but the same bay horse Thomas usually rode, saddled and waiting. Beside it stood a pretty dappled gray mare. I borrowed Daisy from my neighbor, Thomas said. I thought we could ride together. It is a nice evening. Beatrice had not ridden a horse in years, but she was not about to admit that. Thomas helped her into the saddle, his hands careful and respectful, and then swung up onto his own horse. They rode out of town as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The community hall was a simple wooden building on the edge of town, and Beatrice could hear the music before they reached it. A fiddle and a guitar, playing a lively reel. Lanterns hung from the eaves, casting warm golden light, and people were gathered outside, talking and laughing. Beatrice felt her chest tighten. Thomas glanced over at her and must have seen something in her face because he said, "We can turn around right now if you want. No questions asked." She shook her head. "No, I said I would do this." They dismounted and tied the horses to the rail. Thomas offered his arm again, and Beatrice took it, her fingers trembling slightly. As they walked toward the hall, people turned to look. Beatrice saw the recognition in their faces, saw the moment they noticed the scar, saw the quick glances and raised eyebrows. Thomas either did not notice or did not care. He led her inside, where the space had been cleared for dancing and people were whirling across the floor. The music was loud and cheerful, and despite her anxiety, Beatrice felt a small flutter of something that might have been excitement. "Do you know how to dance?" Thomas asked. "It has been a long time. Then we will start slow." He led her to a quieter corner and showed her the basic steps of the reel they were playing. He was patient, guiding her through the movements without making her feel foolish. When she stumbled, he caught her, and when she got the steps right, he grinned at her. "See, you are a natural. I am not. You are doing better than half the people out there." He was exaggerating, but Beatrice appreciated the kindness. They practiced for a few more minutes, and then Thomas led her out onto the floor for the next dance. Beatrice was intensely aware of the people around them, of the looks they were getting, but Thomas kept her focused on him. He talked to her as they danced, telling her silly stories about his horse getting spooked by a tumbleweed, about one of his cattle that seemed convinced it was a dog and followed him everywhere. Despite herself, Beatrice laughed. It felt strange, rusty, as though the muscles in her face had forgotten how. But it also felt good. They danced 3 songs, and then Thomas suggested they get some air. They walked outside where the night had cooled and the stars were beginning to appear. Thomas led her away from the crowd to a spot where they could still hear the music but had some privacy. "You are doing wonderfully," he said. "I can feel people staring. Let them stare. I am proud to be here with you." Beatrice turned to look at him. In the dim light, his face was all planes and shadows. "I do not understand why." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My mother died when I was 12. Fever took her in the space of 3 days. My father started drinking after that. He was a mean drunk, angry at the world for taking her away from him. He took it out on me and my younger brother." Beatrice felt her breath catch. "Thomas. We ran away when I was 16, took what we could carry and just left. My brother and I worked our way west, taking whatever jobs we could find. He died 2 years ago, pneumonia. I was supposed to take care of him and I failed. That was not your fault. Maybe not, but I carry it anyway." He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with emotion. "My point is, I know what it is like to feel damaged, to feel like the things that happened to you marked you in ways that other people cannot see past. But you are not your scar, Beatrice. You are not what was done to you. You are what you do with what comes after." Beatrice felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I do not cry," she said. "All right. I mean it. I do not. I believe you." "My father did this," she said, gesturing at her face. "He was drunk, and I said something he did not like, and he had a knife in his hand. My mother just stood there and watched. When it was done, when I was bleeding all over the kitchen floor, she told me I should have kept my mouth shut." Thomas made a low sound of anger and sorrow. "I left the next morning, took what little money I had hidden away and ran. I have been running ever since, moving from town to town, never staying anywhere long. People always look at me the same way, like I am something broken, something ruined. I got tired of trying to convince them otherwise." "You are not broken," Thomas said fiercely. "You are brave. You survived something terrible and you kept going. That is not broken, Beatrice. That is strong. I do not feel strong. You do not have to feel it for it to be true." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the music from the hall. Finally, Thomas said, "Would you like to go back in? Or would you rather I take you home?" Beatrice considered. The evening had been difficult, but it had also been nice. Thomas had not flinched from her, had not looked at her with pity or disgust. He had looked at her like she was a woman worth dancing with, worth talking to, worth knowing. "I would like to dance some more," she said. The smile he gave her was like a gift. They went back inside and danced until the musicians packed up their instruments and the lanterns were extinguished. Thomas rode with her back to the boarding house, and when they arrived, he helped her down from the horse. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," he said. "I had a wonderful time. Thank you for asking me." Beatrice hesitated, then added, "I had a wonderful time too. May I see you again? You see me all the time at the store. May I see you outside the store? Maybe a picnic next Sunday?" Beatrice looked at him, at the hope in his face, and felt something in her chest loosen just a fraction. "Yes," she said. "A picnic would be nice." Thomas rode away whistling, and Beatrice climbed the stairs to her room with a strange lightness in her step. The next weeks fell into a pattern. Thomas came to Alta every few days, always with some excuse to stop by the store. He brought her wildflowers again, and this time Beatrice accepted them without suspicion. He brought her smooth river stones he had found, and once, a perfect bird's nest that had fallen from a tree. They had their picnic the following Sunday, riding out to a meadow near his ranch where a creek bubbled over smooth stones. Thomas had packed fried chicken and biscuits and apple pie that he admitted his neighbor had made because his cooking was only passable at best. They sat on a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree and talked for hours. Thomas told her more about his ranch, about his plans to expand his herd, about the house he was building with his own hands. Beatrice found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about the books she loved to read, about her dream of maybe one day running her own business, about the small kindnesses she had encountered in her travels that had kept her going when everything seemed hopeless. "You should run your own business," Thomas said. "You are smart enough and hard-working enough. What is stopping you? Money. Experience. The fact that no one would take a woman seriously, let alone one who looks like me." "Some people would not take you seriously," Thomas corrected. "Others would. You cannot let the first group stop you from finding the second." It was easy advice to give, harder to follow, but Beatrice appreciated that he believed in her. As July turned into August, Beatrice found herself looking forward to Thomas's visits with an eagerness she had not felt in years. She started taking more care with her appearance, wearing her better dresses when she knew he was likely to come to town. She caught herself smiling at odd moments, remembering something funny he had said or the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. Mrs. Henderson noticed and commented on it one evening over supper. "You seem happier, dear. That young man of yours must be good for you." Beatrice nearly choked on her stew. "He is not my young man." "He certainly seems to think he is, and you seem to enjoy his company." Beatrice could not argue with that. It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-August when everything changed. Beatrice was in the store, unpacking a shipment of goods that had arrived from Salt Lake City, when she heard shouting in the street. She went to the window and saw a crowd gathering near the saloon. Thomas's bay horse was tied to the rail outside, and her heart lurched with sudden fear. She hurried outside, pushing through the crowd, and saw Thomas standing in the street facing another man. The other man was large and rough-looking, with a brutal face and hands clenched into fists. They were arguing about something, their voices raised and angry. "You cheated me." The man was shouting. "Those cattle you sold me were half-starved." "I sold you exactly what we agreed on," Thomas said, his voice hard. If you did not feed them properly after you bought them, that is your problem, not mine. You calling me a liar? I am saying you did not keep your end of the bargain. You wanted cheap cattle, you got cheap cattle. I never claimed they were prize stock. The big man swung without warning. Thomas ducked, but the blow caught him on the shoulder and sent him stumbling back. The crowd gasped and pressed closer, eager for a fight. Beatrice did not think. She pushed through the last of the onlookers and stepped between Thomas and the other man. "Stop this right now," she said, her voice sharp and carrying. The big man stared at her, his face twisted with anger and surprise. "Get out of the way, woman. This is not your concern. It is my concern when you are starting fights in the middle of the street like a common bully." Beatrice planted her feet and crossed her arms. "Thomas Riker is an honest man. If he says he sold you what you paid for, then he did. If you have a complaint, take it to the sheriff. Otherwise, get back on your horse and leave." The man looked at her scar, and his lip curled. "Why do not you mind your own business, ugly? No one wants to hear from you." The word hit Beatrice like a physical blow, but she did not step back. "I said leave. Or what? You will hit me with that ruined face of yours." Thomas moved then, fast and furious. He grabbed the man by the front of his shirt and shoved him back hard. "You will apologize to the lady. Now." "I will not apologize to." Thomas shoved him again, and this time the man fell back into the dirt. "Apologize," Thomas said again, and there was something dangerous in his voice. The big man looked up at him, at the crowd watching, and must have decided it was not worth it. He scrambled to his feet, muttered something that might have been an apology, and hurried to his horse. He rode out of town at a gallop, and the crowd began to disperse, disappointed that there had been no real fight. Thomas turned to Beatrice, his face tight with anger and concern. "Are you all right? I am sorry you had to hear that. I am sorry you had to step in. That was dangerous, Beatrice. You were about to get in a fist fight in the middle of the street. Someone had to stop you. He could have hurt you. He was going to hurt you." They stared at each other, both breathing hard. Then Thomas said quietly, "Thank you." Beatrice nodded, suddenly feeling shaky now that the adrenaline was fading. "You should get that shoulder looked at." "It is fine. I have had worse. Come into the store. I have some liniment in the back." Thomas followed her inside, and she made him sit on a stool while she retrieved the bottle and a clean rag. She helped him ease his shirt off, trying not to notice the warm strength of his skin, the muscles that came from years of hard work. There was a dark bruise already forming on his shoulder. "This is going to sting," she warned, and then applied the liniment in gentle circles. Thomas hissed through his teeth but did not pull away. After a moment he said, "What that man said to you, he was wrong. He was cruel and wrong. I have heard worse. That does not make it right." Beatrice finished with the liniment and stepped back, handing him his shirt. "I know what I look like, Thomas. I have known for 8 years. I do not need you to defend me from the truth. It is not the truth." Thomas stood facing her, his shirt clutched in his hands. "Beatrice, look at me." She did, reluctantly. "That scar does not define you. It does not make you ugly or unworthy or any of the other things people have said. It makes you you. And I think you are beautiful. You are the only one who does. I doubt that very much. But even if I were, does my opinion not count for something?" Beatrice felt her throat tighten. "Why does it matter to you so much?" "Because I am falling in love with you." The words came out quiet but certain. "I have been falling in love with you since the first day I walked into this store and you were too stubborn to accept help with that bolt of cloth. I love your strength and your independence and the way you face the world even when the world has not been kind to you. I love the way you concentrate when you are working and the way you laugh when you forget to be defensive. I love you, Beatrice Fuller, scar and all. Actually, not scar and all, just you, all of you. Beatrice could not breathe. No one had ever said those words to her. She had never expected anyone would. You cannot, she whispered. I can and I do. You will change your mind. When you really think about it, when you consider what it would mean to be with someone like me, you will realize you made a mistake. Thomas stepped closer, so close she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I am not going to change my mind, and I am going to prove it to you. Every single day, for as long as it takes, I am going to prove to you that you are worth loving. Beatrice shook her head, tears streaming down her face now despite her best efforts. I am afraid, she admitted. I am so afraid. Of what? Of believing you, of letting myself hope, of having this taken away from me. Thomas reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she did not, he gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. I am not going anywhere, he said. I promise you, Beatrice, I am not going anywhere. And then he kissed her, soft and careful and sweet. Beatrice's first instinct was to pull away to protect herself, but his gentleness undid her. She leaned into the kiss, into him, and for the first time in 8 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be loved. When they finally pulled apart, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. I meant what I said. I love you. I do not know if I know how to love someone back, Beatrice said honestly. I do not know if I remember how. Then we will figure it out together. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the dim back room of the general store, and Beatrice felt something shift inside her. Not a sudden transformation, not a complete healing, but a beginning. A small crack in the armor she had built around her heart. Over the next weeks, Thomas made good on his promise. He showed up every day, sometimes with practical reasons, sometimes with none at all. He brought her small gifts, a book of poetry he had ordered from Salt Lake City, a shawl his neighbor had knitted, a jar of honey from the hives behind his ranch. He invited her to visit his ranch, and when she went, he showed her around with obvious pride. The house he was building was not finished yet, but Beatrice could see what it would become. A sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows that would let in the mountain light. Thomas had plans for a garden, for a barn bigger than the rickety one he currently used, for all the small comforts that turned a house into a home. It is going to be beautiful, Beatrice said, running her hand along one of the door frames he had just installed. I hope so. Thomas came to stand beside her. I am building it for a family someday, for a wife and children and a real life. Beatrice's heart clenched. She wanted to ask if she could be part of that vision, but the fear held her back. What if he meant someone else? What if he was building this dream for some hypothetical woman who was whole and undamaged? As if reading her thoughts, Thomas said, I am building it for us, Beatrice, if you will have me. She turned to look at him. You want to marry me? Eventually, yes. When you are ready. When you believe that I mean what I say. He smiled. I am a patient man. I can wait. September came with cooler temperatures and the aspen trees turning gold on the mountainsides. Beatrice found herself spending more and more time at Thomas's ranch, helping him with small tasks, learning about the cattle business, simply being with him. The work was hard but satisfying, and she loved the feeling of accomplishment when they finished a project together. One evening, they were sitting on the half-finished porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and orange. Thomas had his arm around her shoulders, and Beatrice was leaned against him, more relaxed than she could remember being in years. Tell me about your family, Thomas said. Before your father hurt you, were there good times? Beatrice stiffened, but his hold on her was gentle, not restraining. She could pull away if she wanted to. After a moment, she said, Some. When I was very young, before he started drinking so much. He used to take me fishing in the creek near our house. He taught me how to bait the hook, how to be patient and wait for the fish to bite. He would laugh when I caught one, this big booming laugh, and he would tell me I was his clever girl. What changed? My mother lost a baby. She was 6 months along and something went wrong. The baby came too early and did not survive. She never really recovered, not in her mind. She became distant, sad. My father tried to help at first, but he did not know how, so he started drinking instead. And the more he drank, the angrier he got. At the world, at my mother, at me. "I am sorry," Thomas said quietly. "It was a long time ago. That does not make it hurt less." Beatrice turned to look at him. "How did you get to be so wise?" "I am not wise. I am just someone who has been hurt and learned that pain does not have an expiration date. You carry it with you, and the best you can do is find people who will help you carry it." Is that what we are doing? Helping each other carry our pain? I think so. And maybe building something good in spite of it. Beatrice kissed him then, a long, slow kiss that tasted of hope and possibility. When they pulled apart, she said, "I think I am falling in love with you too. I am terrified, but I think it is happening anyway." Thomas's smile was like sunrise. "Good," he said. "That is very good." October brought the first real cold, frost on the grass in the mornings and the need for heavier coats. Beatrice had been in Alta for 6 months now, longer than she had stayed anywhere since leaving home. Mr. Paulson at the store had increased her hours and her pay, trusting her to open and close by herself. She had a little money saved, and she was starting to think about what Thomas had said about running her own business someday. One Saturday afternoon, Thomas came into town with an unusual request. "There is a barn raising at the Johnsons' place tomorrow. Most of the town will be there. I thought maybe you would come with me." Beatrice hesitated. The dance had been one thing, a single evening she could endure. But a barn raising would be all day, surrounded by people, working alongside them, impossible to hide. "I do not know," she said. "I understand if you do not want to, but I think you might enjoy it. The Johnsons are good people, and there will be food and music and a lot of work to be done. It might be nice to be part of it. People will stare. Some will, others will not, and the ones who do not matter anyway." Beatrice twisted her hands together. "What if they do not want me there? What if I make things uncomfortable, Beatrice?" Thomas took her hands, stilling them. "You have as much right to be there as anyone else. More, actually, because you are a better person than half the people who will show up. Please come. I want you there with me." The earnestness in his face decided her. "All right, I will come." The barn raising was exactly what Thomas had described. When they arrived at the Johnsons' ranch the next morning, there were already a dozen wagons and twice as many horses. Men were unloading lumber and organizing tools, while women were setting up tables for the midday meal. Children ran everywhere, excited by the break in routine. Thomas introduced Beatrice to the Johnsons, a weathered couple in their 50s who greeted her warmly. Mrs. Johnson barely glanced at Beatrice's scar before pulling her toward the other women. "We can always use another pair of hands in the kitchen," she said. "I hope you know how to make biscuits." Beatrice found herself in the midst of a group of women, all working together to prepare enough food to feed the crowd. At first, she was tense, waiting for the judgment, the whispers. But the women were too busy to worry about her appearance. They were focused on their tasks, chatting and laughing and occasionally shouting orders at children who got underfoot. A young woman named Sarah, who could not have been more than 20, worked beside Beatrice rolling out biscuit dough. "You are Thomas Riker's girl, are you not?" she asked cheerfully. Beatrice blinked. "I suppose I am. He is a good man. My husband speaks highly of him, says he is fair in his business dealings and works harder than just about anyone." "He does work hard," Beatrice agreed. "And he looks at you like you hung the moon," Sarah added with a grin. "I saw you arrive. That man is smitten." Beatrice felt her cheeks heat. "He is very kind." "It is more than kindness, that is love, plain as day." Sarah nudged her with an elbow. "You are lucky." "I know," Beatrice said, and realized she meant it. The day was long and tiring but surprisingly pleasant. The barn went up with impressive speed, everyone working together with practiced efficiency. Beatrice helped with the cooking and serving, and at the end of the day, when the structure was complete and everyone was gathered around for a celebratory meal, she felt a sense of belonging she had not experienced in years. Thomas found her as the sun was setting, tired and dirty but smiling. "You looked happy today," he said. I am." Beatrice looked around at the people packing up their things, at the new barn standing proud against the darkening sky. "Thank you for bringing me. Thank you for coming." They rode back to Alta in comfortable silence, and when Thomas dropped her off at the boarding house, he kissed her good night with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Beatrice replied, and this time the words came easier. November arrived with the first snow, dusting the mountains and promising a hard winter ahead. Thomas came to town one Wednesday afternoon and asked Beatrice to walk with him. They strolled down the nearly empty Main Street, their breath puffing white in the cold air. "I have been thinking," Thomas said, "about the future, about what I want." Beatrice's heart began to pound. "What do you want?" Thomas stopped walking and turned to face her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I want you to marry me. I know it has only been a few months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Beatrice Fuller. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you that you are worth loving. Will you marry me?" He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band with a small garnet stone. Beatrice stared at it, her mind reeling. This was happening. This was real. Thomas Riker was asking her to marry him, to be his wife, to build a life together. "I am afraid," she whispered. "I know, but say yes anyway." Beatrice looked up at him, at his dear face, at the hope and love shining in his eyes. She thought about the past months, about how he had shown up every single day, how he had been patient and kind and steadfast, how he had looked at her scar and seen past it to the person beneath, how he had made her believe, slowly but surely, that maybe she was not unlovable after all. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger now. "Yes, I will marry you." Thomas let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around in the middle of the street. When he set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger, and then he kissed her with such passion that Beatrice forgot about the cold, forgot about the people who might be watching, forgot about everything except the feeling of being loved. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the community hall. Mrs. Henderson insisted on making Beatrice a new dress, a beautiful blue silk that brought out the gold in her eyes. Sarah and several of the other women from the barn raising helped with the preparations, treating Beatrice like a true friend. On the morning of the wedding, Beatrice stood in her room at the boarding house, looking at herself in the small mirror. The scar was still there, would always be there. But for the first time in 8 years, she looked at her reflection and did not see something ruined. She saw a woman who had survived, who had fought her way through darkness and found light on the other side. She saw someone worth loving. The ceremony was short and sweet. Thomas stood at the front of the hall in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, and when Beatrice walked down the aisle toward him, his face lit up with such joy that several people in the audience wiped tears from their eyes. They exchanged vows, simple promises to love and honor each other, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas kissed Beatrice with gentle reverence. The small crowd cheered, and Beatrice felt a happiness so complete it was almost painful. The celebration afterward was lively, with food and music and dancing. Beatrice danced with Thomas, with Mr. Johnson, with several other men from town who had come to accept her as one of their own. She laughed more that day than she had in years, and when the party finally ended and Thomas drove her in his wagon out to the ranch, she was exhausted but content. The house was finished now, warm and welcoming. Thomas had lit a fire in the hearth, and the main room glowed with soft light. He carried Beatrice over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Riker," he said. "Home," Beatrice repeated, testing the word. It felt right. That night in the bedroom Thomas had prepared with such care, they came together as husband and wife. Thomas was patient and gentle, attuned to every hesitation, every moment of uncertainty. He whispered words of love and reassurance, and Beatrice let herself trust him completely. It was tender and awkward and perfect, and when it was over, she lay in his arms and felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. The winter was harsh, as winters in the Utah mountains tended to be. Snow piled high, and there were days when they could not leave the ranch. But Beatrice did not mind. She and Thomas created a cozy life together, working side by side to care for the cattle, cooking meals together in the warm kitchen, spending long evenings by the fire reading or talking or simply being together. Thomas continued to prove his love every day, in big ways and small. He brought her coffee in bed on particularly cold mornings. He listened when she talked about her dreams of running a business and helped her plan what that might look like. He held her when she had nightmares about her father, soothing her back to sleep with soft words and gentle hands. And slowly, the voice in Beatrice's head that insisted she was unlovable grew quieter. It did not disappear entirely. She suspected it never would. But it became easier to ignore, easier to drown out with the evidence of Thomas's steady devotion. Spring came with a rush of melt water and new grass, and Beatrice discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, with missed monthly courses and morning nausea, and when she told Thomas, he picked her up and spun her around just as he had when she agreed to marry him. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." Beatrice was terrified and thrilled in equal measure. She had never imagined herself as a mother, had never thought anyone would want to build a family with her. But here she was, carrying Thomas's child, preparing to bring new life into the world. The pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. But Thomas was endlessly patient, bringing her dry toast and ginger tea, rubbing her back when the nausea became overwhelming. As her belly grew, he built a cradle with his own hands, sanding the wood until it was smooth as silk. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Beatrice said, "What if I am a terrible mother? What if I do not know how to love our child the way they deserve?" Thomas took her hand. "You will be a wonderful mother. You have so much love in you, Beatrice. You have just been afraid to show it. But I see it every day in the way you care for the animals, in the way you tend your garden, in the way you love me. Our child will be lucky to have you." "How are you always so sure?" "Because I know you, and I believe in you." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Thomas Riker. I love you too, Beatrice Riker." Their son was born on a crisp October morning after a long and difficult labor. Thomas held Beatrice's hand through it all, whispering encouragement, wiping her forehead with cool cloths. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Thomas cut the cord with shaking hands and then placed the tiny bundle in Beatrice's arms. "He is beautiful," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. Beatrice looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers and scrunched-up face, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. This was her child, hers and Thomas's, and he was perfect. They named him James, after Thomas's younger brother. He was a healthy baby, strong and loud, and he quickly became the center of their world. Beatrice discovered that she loved being a mother, loved the feeling of being needed, of having someone depend on her completely. She was good at it too, patient and attentive and fiercely protective. Thomas was a wonderful father, taking to the role with the same steady devotion he showed in everything he did. He would walk the floor with James when the baby was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice. He built toys for him, carved wooden animals and painted blocks. He looked at his son with such pride and joy that it made Beatrice's heart ache. The years passed, busy and full. The ranch prospered under Thomas's careful management, and they were able to hire a few ranch hands to help with the work. Beatrice opened a small dress shop in Alta, fulfilling her dream of running her own business. She had a gift for sewing, for understanding what women wanted and needed, and the shop became a gathering place for the town's women. James grew into a bright, curious boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's brown eyes. When he was 3, Beatrice became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. Their daughter was born in the spring, a tiny thing with a cap of blonde hair and a serene disposition. They named her Emma, and James adored her from the first moment he saw her. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and lean years, sickness and loss and all the challenges that came with building a life in a harsh land. But through it all, Thomas and Beatrice faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. One evening, when James was 7 and Emma was 4, the family was gathered in the living room. Thomas was reading a story to the children while Beatrice worked on mending a shirt. She looked up and saw her family, saw the life they had built, and felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Thomas noticed and raised an eyebrow. "What is wrong?" "Nothing." Beatrice smiled. "Everything is right. That is the problem. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to be taken away from me." Thomas set down the book and crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair. "Nothing is going to take this away from you. We have built this life together and it is ours. You are safe, Beatrice. You are loved. You can stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Papa, what shoe?" Emma asked, confused. Thomas laughed and scooped up his daughter. "It is just an expression, sweetheart." "It is a silly expression," James declared. "You are absolutely right," Thomas agreed, and then he tickled James until the boy was shrieking with laughter. Beatrice watched them, her family, and felt the last remnants of her old fear finally release their grip. Thomas had been right. He had proved her wrong day after day, year after year. She was lovable. She was loved, and she always would be. Years continued to unfold like the seasons, each bringing its own joys and challenges. James grew tall and strong, helping his father with the ranch work and showing a natural talent for handling cattle. Emma was quieter, more studious, and she loved spending time in town with her mother, learning the dressmaking trade. Beatrice taught her daughter everything she knew, and Emma proved to have an even better eye for design than her mother. When James turned 17, a young woman named Lucy moved to Alta with her family. She was pretty and practical, the daughter of the new school teacher, and she and James were immediately smitten with each other. Thomas teased his son mercilessly about his red face whenever Lucy was around, and Beatrice smiled, remembering her own awkward courtship. 2 years later, James married Lucy in the same community hall where Thomas and Beatrice had wed. It was a beautiful ceremony, and Beatrice cried watching her son pledge his life to someone he loved. Thomas held her hand throughout, and when she looked at him, she saw tears in his eyes too. "How did we get so lucky?" Thomas whispered. "I do not know," Beatrice replied. "But I am grateful every single day." James and Lucy built a small house on the ranch, and soon they had children of their own, twin boys who were as wild and energetic as their father had been. Beatrice became a grandmother, a role she embraced with joy. She loved having the grandchildren visit, loved spoiling them and then sending them home to their exhausted parents. Emma married at 23 to a young lawyer who had opened a practice in Alta. He was kind and intelligent, and he looked at Emma with the same adoration that Thomas had always shown Beatrice. They moved into a house in town, and Emma took over running the dress shop full-time, expanding it to include a tailoring business for men's clothing as well. Thomas and Beatrice grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and full lives. But they were happy, deeply and completely happy. They spent their days working on the ranch, which James now mostly managed, and their evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. One summer evening, when Beatrice was 53 and Thomas was 56, they sat in their favorite spot, holding hands as they had done for decades. "You remember the first day we met?" Thomas asked. "You mean when you startled me on the ladder and I nearly dropped that bolt of cloth on your head? That is the one." Thomas smiled. "I knew right then that you were special, something about the way you held yourself, proud and strong even though you were trying to hide. I was terrified of you." "I know, but you let me in anyway." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "You did not give me much choice. You were relentlessly kind. You say that like it is a bad thing. It was terrifying. I kept waiting for you to realize what a mistake you were making, courting the scarred woman. But you never did. Because it was not a mistake. It was the best decision I ever made." Thomas turned to look at her, and his eyes were still that same storm cloud gray blue, still looking at her with love and devotion. "You were never unlovable, Beatrice. You just needed someone patient enough to prove it to you. You spent every day proving me wrong," Beatrice said softly. "Every single day for all these years. And I will keep proving you wrong for as many days as I have left. I love you, Beatrice Riker. I loved you when we met. I loved you when we married. I loved you when we had our children, and I will love you until I take my last breath." Beatrice felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I love you too, Thomas, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." "You saved me." "We saved each other," Thomas corrected. "That is what love does." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began to appear, pinpricks of light in the vast darkness. Somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear Emma and her husband visiting, their voices mixing with the laughter of grandchildren. "We built a good life," Beatrice said. "We built a wonderful life," Thomas agreed. "And it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us. Years to watch our grandchildren grow, maybe even meet some great-grandchildren. Years to sit on this porch and watch the sunsets. Years to love each other." That sounds perfect. And it was. Thomas and Beatrice lived many more years, surrounded by family and love. They saw James's twins grow into young men, saw Emma have 3 more children, watched their family tree expand and flourish. They remained active and engaged, Thomas still working with the cattle well into his 60s, Beatrice still sewing beautiful dresses for the women of Alta. When Thomas finally passed away at the age of 74, peacefully in his sleep, Beatrice mourned him deeply. But she did not despair. She had 56 years of love and happiness to look back on, 56 years of proof that she was not unlovable, that she was worthy of devotion and partnership and joy. She lived another 8 years after Thomas's death, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She spent her days working in her garden, sewing, visiting with friends, and every evening she would sit on the porch and talk to Thomas as though he were still there beside her. On a warm summer evening, very much like the one when Thomas had first told her he loved her, Beatrice passed away quietly, sitting in her chair on the porch, watching the sunset over the mountains she had called home for more than 50 years. Her family buried her beside Thomas in the small cemetery on the ranch, and they carved words on her tombstone that Emma insisted on. She was beloved, and she was. Beatrice Fuller Riker had spent the first 24 years of her life believing she was unlovable, damaged beyond repair. But Thomas Riker had spent every day after that proving her wrong, and in the end, she died knowing that she had been loved deeply, completely, and forever. The ranch passed to James, who ran it with the same dedication his father had shown. The dress shop stayed in Emma's family for 3 generations, and the story of Thomas and Beatrice became a legend in Alta, a reminder that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that patience and kindness could overcome fear and pain, and that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserved to be loved. Their great-great-grandchildren would grow up hearing the story of how Thomas Riker courted the shy woman with the scar, how he had been relentless in his devotion, how he had proved every single day that she was worth loving. It became a standard, a measure of what true love should be, patient, steadfast, and unwavering. And in a small house in Alta, Utah, there still hung a faded photograph of a young couple on their wedding day. The woman's face showed a scar, but she was smiling, and the man beside her was looking at her as though she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Below the photograph, in neat handwriting, someone had written, "True love sees the heart, not the scars." It was a truth that Beatrice Fuller had learned slowly, painfully, but completely. And it was a truth that had set her free.